Welcome to Mastering the Moment. This is our new podcast series that we're launching, a series of short 10-minute self-improvement recordings to talk about topics like managing your reactions, making the most of your time, building resilience, focusing on presence and control, and hopefully we can provide some actionable insights to respond to life's challenges. My name's Heidi Addig. I'm a director here at DewPoint International. Some of you may know me already. I've been in this company for the past 25 years, and I hope to share with you through this podcast series some insights to help you through your daily work. Now, our first session, our first podcast today is about understanding conflict. And to understand conflict, I think we need to look at the type of conflict that we encounter. So I'm going to share with you some examples so that we can work out how to diagnose the type of conflict we have. And if we can understand the type of conflict we have, then it makes it a little bit easier to figure out how to solve that conflict. So let's look at the first example, which is a kind of practical approach to conflict, a practical type of conflict. And that's where goals are not aligned, right? Where we're not aligned on the root cause or the goals. And a good example of this is something we've all recently experienced, and that was the pandemic, COVID-19. When COVID-19 first came out, there were many theories about where it came from. Was this from animals? Was this invented in a lab? There were many conspiracy theories that came out. The point is that people didn't really agree on the root cause. So by the time the solution came out, vaccines, infection management measures, people didn't really trust the solutions. So we had problems in agreeing on what was the cause, and then of course we had problems agreeing on the solution. And that's a good example of this practical type of conflict where we have a fundamental sense of disagreement. We disagree over the cause, then we'll disagree over the solutions. We're seeing things from different perspectives, and so it's just hard for us to find an agreement. I think the good thing about this type of conflict is that if we can diagnose the root cause and we can really understand that we see it from different perspectives, there is a way to find a solution that meets both perspectives. So that's the first type of conflict. The second type of conflict that I think most of us find is more challenging is the people type of conflict. And I have a couple of examples for this. So the first example is a personal example. I had a car, this is some years ago when I first started working in Hong Kong. I had a secondhand car. And I had a lot of problems with this car. It was an automatic car. And then somehow, whenever I was driving in the middle of acceleration, it would stall. And this is automatic, so it shouldn't be stalling. I'm not doing anything. I'm just pressing on the accelerator, driving it like a normal way that you drive an automatic car. Anyway, I kept coming back to my mechanic and complaining about this issue and saying, can you look into it? Can you look into it? Because there's a problem there. And he kept coming back and saying, I don't see a problem. There's nothing wrong with it. And sometimes kind of blaming me and the way I was driving. And I have to be honest, I started questioning myself. Is it the way I'm driving? Because he doesn't see a problem with the car. But this kept happening, and I kept going back to him, and he kept coming out with the same answer. And I finally got so fed up that I brought the car to another mechanic, somebody I've never seen before. And this second mechanic looked at the car, looked at the engine, and immediately told me to sell the car, get rid of it, dump it. Now, I thought that was an interesting response because, he's new to me. He could potentially offer a solution, make a lot of money out of me, But instead, he was like, you don't want to deal with this. This is a problem car. So he offered a solution that actually didn't benefit him. So, I really believed him because I've been having problems with the car. So this is a good example where the first mechanic did not listen to me. All right. I was not being heard. And I had this feeling of being misunderstood, not being listened to, whereas the second mechanic did listen to me. And so inevitably, I had this conflict with the first mechanic, right? This is human needs not being met, all right? The basic human need that I want to be listened to, I want to be understood, I want to be appreciated. And this wasn't happening in this example. And so when the first mechanic didn't listen to me, I felt disappointed. I felt like, is it me? What's going on? Right? I'm questioning myself. Right? There's a lack of empathy, a lack of understanding. That's the first example of not being understood, the people side of conflict. The second example of people conflict is where your expectations are not being met. And this is a situation that I've encountered time and again with different clients where they have run into a problem where they are over promising. All right, they're over promising to their customers, for example, on delivery schedules, on timelines. And I say over promising because inevitably they are not able to meet those timelines. And in one case in particular, my client told me about they would frequently overpromise to their customer and inevitably fail to meet the deadlines. And as a result, their customer lost trust in them. They became more controlling, questioning, challenging them. Their relationship was a sense of mistrust and very tense. And so it was just like they were facing conflict all the time with their customer because they didn't have this trust. And it was all down to not meeting expectations. What was planned and agreed upon doesn't come through. That, it's just a failure. It's a failure that could have been managed. It could have been easily prevented. It's frustrating for the customer when all these disappointments accumulate, but it's also frustrating for the organization because now they have this kind of broken relationship with their customer. So that's the other type of people. And then we have the kind of persistent or ongoing conflicts that can result from not sharing the same values or beliefs or goals, right? So a sense of we don't align. Typically, this might come about because of a personality or a value clash, right? So you talk about personality clashes or value clashes. I have a couple of examples of this. So personality clash is that, I had a client who was brought in from Europe to work in China. She had never worked in China before. Being European, she was much more outspoken, more outgoing, and very expressive, right? She was very expressive in her body language, in her facial expressions, and her voice. And her Chinese coworkers were really not used to this, right? They just found it very uncomfortable. And so that was an example of a personality clash because it was really her outgoing personality compared to their style of communication. Another example of this value clash or not sharing, not aligning on our goals or our beliefs. It's a client case that we had where the MD of this organization had requested us to do a team building with his management team. What had happened was that they had a new manager in the team who had joined maybe a few months before, and somehow in the course of those few months, there started to be more conflicts within the management team. And so to prepare for this team building, we conducted interviews with every single one of the managers, one to one, to try to understand what was going on, what was their perspectives. And what we discovered was that, this newcomer had a very different style. He had a different personality, different style, different communication approach, even kind of different management approach. And so he tended to clash with the other managers. And as a result, they communicated less. They started to lose trust in one another, right? This is what happens when we have conflict. So we were asked to come in and do this team building. And in the team building, we facilitated them to communicate, to open up, to talk about what were these differences, why were they facing this challenge. But it really boiled down to a complete lack of communication. They did not talk to each other. I think that's the thing when we have this breakdown in communication that is a result of conflict. It kind of perpetuates, it makes that conflict more persistent, more ongoing. And it seems almost like we can't solve it. In the end, the solution was to try to find our common objective, right? Find what is it that we all want to work on together. Because they weren't communicating, they had lost sight of how to work together. But by starting to kind of retune, refocus on their common goals, they were able to kind of build a new foundation of how they work as a management team. So, in managing conflict, I think what's important to remember is or understanding where that conflict comes from. What type of conflict that we have? If we can understand the type of conflict, then it will help us to figure out what is the solution to that conflict. How do we unlock and open up our communication? Ask ourselves, why have we partnered together? Why did we come together? What are our common objectives, our goals, our interests? Adopt the steps for managing conflict using openness, listening, curiosity, and learning about our different perspectives, our different opinions, our different ways of seeing the world. So communication is key to the solution, but we have to understand what was causing it in the first place. So that was our first episode on mastering the moment about understanding conflict. Stay tuned to our next episode on managing expectations. And if you have a story or case to share, or you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Thank you.